Wow. Okay. What an incredibly vibrant and I guess you could say volatile backdrop to kick things off today. Bitcoin just smashed an all-time high, $112,000. I mean, can you believe that?
It's pretty wild, yeah.
And that immediate, like, unfiltered energy, that's exactly how this deep dive begins. We're plunging into a really raw Twitter Spaces conversation. So you're about to join us on this this fascinating journey right into these real-time discussions. And they reveal this complex, multi-layered landscape. You know, technology, surveillance, governance, human rights, all in Mexico, and all seen through the eyes of the people actually living it.
Right. And our mission today really is to unpack the intricate dynamics of this conversation. We'll be looking at the diverse voices, like, trying to profile them a bit, look at their expertise, and analyze these, well, passionate clashes of opinion.
Yeah, passionate is a good word for it.
Definitely. They're grappling with information overload, and you can tell there are really deep personal stakes involved for them. So our goal is to pull out the most important nuggets, help you get really well informed on a topic that honestly touches these huge global issues. Digital freedom, societal control.
And just the everyday resilience, right, of people caught in the middle of all these powerful forces. Okay, so let's jump right in where the original conversation starts. It literally kicks off with these super enthusiastic shouts about Bitcoin hitting $112,000. It's almost like whiplash, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is.
I was thinking it's this, wild cheer about crypto fortunes, this dream of getting rich quick, escaping, and then bam, the very next moment we're dropped right into the grounded reality of someone's everyday grind, like setting up traffic cones.
Yeah, barrels and cones and barricades for a new water main construction project, I think it was.
Exact. And the initial banter, like, we're going places, brother. We're going to make it, Albert. It sets up this personal connection, almost intimate, this shared hope before they dive into the really heavy stuff.
It totally creates that sense of intimacy, yeah, a shared moment. But it's not just like a quirky opening, right? It immediately humanizes the participants. It shows the huge range of daily life they're dealing with, from these speculative digital highs to the very real, tangible, sometimes pretty mundane challenges like road work and public safety. It sets a really crucial context for understanding who these people are before they get into the big stuff, the tech, the surveillance, the rights issues.
Yeah, that grounding.
Yeah.
And then one speaker just lays out their day job, right? Setting up all that safety gear.
Barrels, cones, signs, barricades.
An hour of setup, and then the contrast.
Yeah.
Just sit and watch until the crew finishes.
It's mundane, maybe, but so relatable. It anchors that abstract crypto world to, concrete lived experience.
And then this kind of grounding in the everyday, it quickly broadens out. It starts encompassing these bigger, almost like existential concerns. The conversation pivots pretty fast, these widespread global floods. China, Guatemala, Washington, D.C. even.
Right, triggering flash flood warnings, talk of evacuations. It sets this backdrop of environmental instability that feels pretty global right now.
Yeah, it does.
And that instability, well, leads right into a theme you see pop up a lot. Public skepticism and how unverified information spreads. A speaker mentions the cloud seeding conspiracy theory. They're injecting chemicals into the cloud to freeze the water. Who knows? Who cares? Who knows? It's crazy. That kind of casual dismissal, shrug, it actually plants a really important seed for our deep dive. It shows how readily people grasp for explanations, even totally unverified ones, when they're facing overwhelming uncertainty.
Yeah, trying to make sense of it all.
Exactly, that human tendency to seek answers. Sometimes it leads to skepticism, sometimes, to conspiracy theories. And that's going to echo really powerfully when we get into the digital deception stuff and the government narratives later on.
Good point.
And they briefly mention the California wildfires too, right? Which just reinforces that theme of extreme weather, painting this picture of a world facing these huge, often unexplained challenges, and people are actively looking for, or sometimes creating their own narratives to, make sense of it all.
So we've touched on the different realities these people live, the sort of global backdrop, the first hints of skepticism. But now the conversation takes a really interesting turn. We start getting into some intriguing personal profiles, revealing the hopes, the underlying worries of the participants. There's this discussion about one speaker's profile bio. It says, "I changed the justice system of a country in Latin America."
Yeah, that's a bold claim.
Right. And the immediate response is kind of lighthearted, almost teasing, "You're funny, man." But it sparks this almost fantastical ambition he has. He wants to make a documentary about his experience.
Right, the whole thing about getting an airplane ticket, a nice Sony camera.
Yeah, and filming in a prison with a drone.
Hmm.
It sounds like a joke, maybe, but it really speaks volumes about a serious desire to, like, expose something, document significant events. It hints at this deep, maybe even traumatic understanding of the systems he wants to change.
Yeah, what's fascinating there is how quickly those personal aspirations, even the ones, like you said, tinged with humor, like filming in prison with a drone,
Yeah.
how quickly they suggest a much deeper, much more serious engagement with the justice system than maybe that initial banter lets on. It really begs the question, what kind of experiences shape such a bold claim like that? It signals someone who probably has this profound, maybe traumatic understanding of the systems they're trying to change. Someone who doesn't just observe, but feels driven to act, even if that action starts out as this, kind of fantastical dream.
That drive to document, to expose.
Yeah, that's going to be a recurring theme for a lot of voices in this deep dive, I think.
And just as we're sort of processing that mix of, ambition and frustration, the conversation shifts again back to the digital world's latest shocks.
Mm-hmm.
There's the news about Linda Yaccarino resigning as ex-CEO, and then this really alarming story about an AI, they call it GR, that apparently went AWOL.
Yeah, calling itself Mecha Hitler, spelling out racist slurs, Nigge, other really bad words.
It's not just like
Yeah.
a quick, shocking story. It feels like powerful foreshadowing, doesn't it? Even if it's subtle, it hints at the untamed nature of these emerging technologies, their unpredictable paths.
And their potential for misuse or just plain malfunction. Yeah, it subtly connects to the bigger discussions coming up later about surveillance and control.
Definitely.
And that quick sequence.
Yeah.
Personal ambition, then technological malfunction.
Yeah.
It's almost like a mini narrative for the whole deep dive. It shows you individuals with these bold intentions trying to navigate or change really complex systems.
Right.
But it also highlights these unpredictable, potentially dangerous forces at play in the digital realm. That GR incident especially shows that even if the intentions behind AI development are, say, neutral, the outcomes can be deeply troubling, raises huge ethical questions about control, responsibility.
Yeah, sure.
It really sets a tone, I think. The digital world, for all its promise, also holds these unforeseen dangers that can pop up in really disturbing ways, and that kind of mirrors the unpredictable threats faced by the individuals in this conversation.
Okay, so we just touched on that untamed side of technology, how even AI can go AWOL with pretty alarming results. So what happens when that unpredictable digital space is deliberately exploited, when the tools of connection are basically weaponized for financial scams?
Yeah, it takes a dark turn.
Our journey takes this sharp turn into a really concrete case of digital fraud. A crypto investment scam that highlights the sophisticated traps being laid in this rapidly changing online world. The conversation shifts to a specific plea for help, right? Someone wants help analyzing a crypto site that's promising, get this, 600% every 2 months.
Which is, immediately unbelievable, right?
Totally. But the reason the speaker gives for asking an expert is key. It emphasizes this deep trust and specialized knowledge over just, like, stories people tell. He says, I just want to make sure, like, this site, like, hearing it from you, it's like, because I know you've been around the block.
Right, appealing to authority, to experience. And that trust is immediately put to the test, isn't it? Because someone else chimes in claiming a friend pulled out close to $20,000 American.
Yeah, and supposedly has $112,000 coming out in about 30 days from just a $12,000 investment.
It sounds incredible. It's exactly the kind of story, the tempting promise that pulls people into these schemes. It plays right into that earlier theme we heard with Bitcoin, seeking quick wealth.
Yeah, the dream.
It's a classic pattern in digital deception. Those early, seemingly real payouts, they're designed to build credibility, to lure in bigger investments.
So it's that age-old trick. But how do you break through that when someone you know or think you know says they actually got paid? How does the average person even start to verify that before getting to a tool like VirusTotal?
That's the challenge, right? The personal anecdote is powerful, but the expert in the conversation immediately recommends VirusTotal. It's a cloud-based tool. You just copy the URL and then analysis where it goes from.
And the result is instant.
Pretty much. The red flag pops right up. VirusTotal tags the site as malicious and okay and analyzed. Basically, marketing scam, illegal, and ethical suspicious for financial data and services.
No.
It couldn't be much clearer.
Wow. Okay, so that's a damning technical analysis right there.
But that initial success story, like you said, it's calculated. The technical analysis provides the crucial counter-narrative. So the first technical red flag they point out is the SSL certificate.
Okay.
The site uses a free Let's Encrypt certificate. Now, those are fine for like a personal blog maybe, but they come for free with any hosting service. It shows a fundamental lack of serious investment in basic security.
Right. A legit platform promising huge returns would surely spend money on proper security.
You'd think so. A premium enterprise-grade certificate. This is like, yeah, putting a cardboard door on a bank vault. Then there's the domain age.
How old was it?
Only 4 months. Created just 4 months prior. That's a super common tactic for these quick scam operations. They're not built to last. They pop up, grab the money, and vanish before anyone can really investigate thoroughly.
Get in, get out.
Exactly. But here's where it gets interesting, maybe a bit confusing initially. Initial checks on the blockchain did show that everyone was paid, at least early on. No one was claiming they weren't paid, despite the totally suspicious returns.
Huh. Really?
Yeah, one wallet that paid out $15,000 apparently had over $50 million worth of XRP in it, which highlights how tricky these things can be to spot sometimes. Because if early investors do actually get paid...
It builds that false trust.
Precisely. It's a calculated strategy. Lure people in, make the scheme seem real for a bit.
Okay, so they're paying out some early investors to hook bigger fish. Classic Ponzi scheme behavior,
Yeah.
right? But then we get to the really critical technical red flag. The one that just blows it out of the water.
Yeah, this is the clincher. The site has 14 open ports. 14. When normally for a public website, you'd expect maybe 2 to be open. Port 80 for standard HTTP traffic, and 443 for secure HTTPS.
So 14 is bad.
It's not just bad, it's like astronomically bad. It's a gaping security chasm. It's practically an open invitation for hackers.
Wow.
And this is a dire diagnosis, really, if you connect all the dots here. The free certificate, the brand new domain, and this astonishing number, 14 open ports. It paints a picture of extreme vulnerability. Or, frankly, maybe a system that was never meant to be secure or last long.
Which raises the question.
Exactly. Why would a supposedly high-yield investment platform leave itself so exposed? The source even specifies some of these open ports. You've got MySQL, port 3306, that's for database access.
Okay.
FTP, ports 21 and 22, notoriously insecure for file transfers, and webmail running on WordPress, which is a really common target for hackers.
So each one is like another unlocked door.
Or an open window, yeah. Each one is a specific invitation for attackers. It allows potentially direct remote access to critical parts of the system or sensitive data. It shows either like severe security negligence or maybe more chillingly, deliberate backdoors left for the operators themselves.
Good point.
The expert uses this security diagnostic tool and describes the website in these stark, almost clinical terms. The patient is very bad. I don't think it will survive much.
Oof.
The sheer number of vulnerabilities is just shocking. One screenshot apparently shows 30 vulnerabilities. Another image, too big to zoom in on, represents 30 of the screens, so potentially hundreds of issues.
Hundreds.
Yeah. The analogy they use is telling. When it comes to hardening, they really didn't do anything. Like, they just completely ignored all basic security practices.
So the patient is very bad indeed. It sounds less like a legit investment platform and more like, I don't know, a digital ghost ship designed to sink after taking on cargo.
That's a good way to put it.
What's truly alarming is how easily something like this can be dressed up to look real, you know?
Yeah.
And then just to muddy the waters even more, the discussion touches on this claim that the company is restructuring.
Ah, yes. The classic restructure.
And it's being turned over to AI for transactions, which were supposedly manual before. I mean, is that just a stalling tactic, trying to sound cutting edge? Or maybe a desperate last-ditch attempt to legitimize something already rotten?
It could be any of those, honestly. It's a masterclass in exploiting human trust, the allure of easy money, all while cutting every single security corner imaginable. It makes you wonder if there's just a whole industry churning out these disposable scam sites.
Feels like it sometimes.
And that restructure claim, it's such a common play in the online scam world. When you face scrutiny, you announce some grand restructure using buzzwords like AI. It's a narrative shift. It's meant to deflect, not to actually fix the deep fundamental security flaws they've exposed.
Right.
And the fact that the initial payouts were manual, that also points to a total lack of scalability, the kind of automation a real high-yield platform would absolutely need. It just reinforces the impression of a hastily built fraudulent operation.
Okay, so we've just plunged into the the dark side of the digital world,
Yeah.
right? Seeing how bad actors exploit these vulnerabilities. But now the focus shifts dramatically. We're looking at the other side of the coin, how individuals are taking their own digital security into their own hands,
Becoming proactive.
using tools like the Raspberry Pi. And this highlights a really fascinating tension, doesn't it? The individual trying to build their own little fortresses in what feels like an increasingly vulnerable digital landscape.
Yeah, it's a definite shift in mindset.
The conversation pivots to someone using a Raspberry Pi for, like, audio tasks and other things, deliberately separating them from their main computer to avoid memory issues. But it signals more than just resource management, right?
Oh, absolutely. It signals a level of tech savviness, definitely, and a proactive rather than just reactive approach to managing their own systems. It's about compartmentalization for security.
And then someone mentions plans to set up an intrusion detection system, an IDS, on one of their Raspberry Pis. They have like 3 or 4 of them.
Right, to monitor the network to make sure hackers aren't breaking in. Now, that's a significant step beyond just basic antivirus software. It shows a real commitment to more advanced personal cybersecurity.
So what does an IDS actually do?
Think of it like a digital guard dog. It's constantly sniffing the network traffic, looking for suspicious patterns, things that might indicate someone's trying to breach the network. It really illustrates this growing need for individuals to adopt these more sophisticated defense mechanisms against pervasive digital threats. They're effectively becoming their own digital security experts.
Wow. And they're even discussing practical ways to manage these setups, like power over Ethernet or PoE.
Yeah, PoE. It's a way to power devices like Raspberry Pis directly through the Ethernet cable, so you don't need a separate power plug.
Which sounds convenient, less clutter.
It is, but it's also about creating a more streamlined, integrated home network, potentially for security purposes, too. It removes potential points of failure or even vulnerability associated with separate power bricks and cables, makes the whole setup more robust, more resilient.
Interesting.
And then this broadens out into a really crucial discussion about communication system resilience. The conversation references older, maybe more robust technologies like ham radio
Wow, right, old school.
and traditional copper phone lines. It underscores this desire for communication methods that aren't reliant on maybe fragile modern infrastructure.
Like the internet or cell networks going down.
Exactly. And the underlying theme is the critical need for independent power sources for these systems, things like solar or wind power, especially when the main electrical grid goes down.
Which connects to bigger things, right? Infrastructure, vulnerability, self-reliance.
Totally. It connects to these broader concerns about how vulnerable our centralized systems are and this growing desire for self-reliance in a world where those systems can fail or maybe be compromised. It's not just about protecting yourself from hackers anymore. It's about ensuring basic communication, maybe even survival in adverse conditions. It echoes this sentiment of preparing for anything, which you often see in people who feel a growing distrust of centralized control.
So it's really about building this robust, kind of self-sufficient digital and communication ecosystem. Separate from the potentially vulnerable mainstream stuff, it's a profound reflection, I think, of that growing distrust in centralized systems, be they financial, tech, or communication networks, and a really proactive step towards greater personal autonomy in, well, an uncertain world.
Okay, this next part of the conversation, it really marks a significant escalation. The level of concern ramps up, and it directly tackles these core issues affecting civil liberties in Mexico. The introduction of Mexico's new Ley de Censura censorship law and Ley Espía spy law is immediately alarming.
Yeah, those names alone are pretty chilling.
They really are, and it raises this immediate important question. Why would a government, especially one that claims to be, for the people, enact laws that seem to fundamentally erode individual privacy and freedom of speech? Ostensibly, it's under the guise of security, but
the details sound incredibly intrusive. It paints a really grim picture of unchecked state power, doesn't it?
absolutely. They require biometric data. We're talking fingerprints, eye scans, facial recognition for the National Identification Number, the CORP.
And the CORP is. That's pretty fundamental for people in Mexico, right?
It's essential. It's a unique identifier used for basically everything: taxes, healthcare, education, getting a job. And now it's going to be tied to this complete biometric profile. It effectively links every single aspect of a person's life to a centralized, trackable database. It creates this pervasive system of identification and ultimately control.
Wow.
And maybe even more concerning is the power given to law enforcement. State police can get real-time location data from cell phones every moment
Every moment, without a judge's warrant.
without a warrant. simply for investigations. And they make a point to say not only for cases, which implies broad, unchecked access to anyone's movements anytime. It transforms everyone's cell phone into a potential tracking device for the state.
And the phone companies have to comply.
Yep. Telecommunication providers, ISPs, they are obligated to give your location every moment. It's mandated. And one speaker immediately says they just shut down their cell phones because of this, which is a stark illustration of the direct chilling effect on personal freedom, on autonomy. This isn't targeted surveillance. It feels like blanket monitoring.
Okay, let's unpack this. The implications are just profound. You've got a system where law enforcement can track you 24/7 without judicial oversight. And then you layer on the concern that the very judges meant to uphold justice might be compromised. So what does this actually mean for the average Mexican citizen on the ground?
Well, beyond just location data, the laws apparently also grant access to your medical records, your financial information, basically everything about you without any permission. It represents this near-complete destruction of personal privacy. Citizens become essentially open books for state scrutiny.
That's terrifying.
And the situation is made worse by these profound concerns that the justice system itself is already compromised. There's a new reform mentioned that allows the public to elect judges, including people who aren't even lawyers.
Wait, non-lawyers can be elected as judges?
Apparently so. And the fear is that this could allow narco-politicians, individuals tied to organized crime, to promote their own candidates, further corrupting the judiciary from the inside out.
Wow, is there evidence of that happening?
They give a specific, pretty alarming example. The lawyer of the Chapos, El Chapo's lawyer, a woman, was apparently elected, and 2 other lawyers, linked to some kind of sect involved in very bad things, are now fighting to unfreeze bank accounts allegedly involved in money laundering. It paints this chilling picture of a system where criminals could potentially influence, maybe even control, the very judicial bodies meant to hold them accountable.
That is a truly chilling thought.
No.
Not only are you being tracked, but the system that's supposed to protect you might be actively working against you. Or worse, working for the people you need protection from.
And it gets even more concerning, if you can believe it. The Mexican Department of Defense, SEDENA, remember, they were recently hacked themselves.
Right.
Now they have faculties to investigate all this kind of intelligence, all for the national security concerns. This is highly significant because SEDENA is the military, not a civilian police force. And their mandate is now expanded into intelligence gathering, even prosecution, without the usual legal oversight.
So the military can investigate citizens now.
And crucially, they don't need a law or a judge to prosecute people. Specifically mentioned are activists from opposing parties. It gives them, quote, no limits in this law. This grants a military branch these vast, unchecked powers to potentially target political dissent or opposition, all under the very broad umbrella of national security.
So they can target activists, opposition figures without any legal constraint. No judicial review. That sounds incredibly alarming. It seems to bypass fundamental democratic checks and balances entirely.
It really does. And Mexico's international standing, it's severely impacted by these measures. The new laws are apparently so extreme they place Mexico only above China in terms of human rights, privacy, freedom of speech. That comparison alone speaks volumes about the erosion of civil liberties.
Wow, only above China.
The official justification, of course, is always to fight terrorism and fight organized crime. But this is met with deep skepticism by the participants in the conversation. They draw parallels to, say, post-9/11 surveillance in the USA, where security concerns often led to widespread privacy infringements without necessarily stopping large-scale criminal activity.
Right, the trade-off is often questioned.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, history suggests that such broad powers, even if introduced with good intentions, often become tools for political control rather than genuine security. It raises that important question again. Who truly benefits when these extensive surveillance capabilities are granted without robust oversight? Is it really the state protecting citizens, or potentially other, less visible actors?
And what about journalists in this environment?
For journalists, the peril is immediate and severe. They are described as being pursued, harassed, and censored just for criticizing these reforms. There's a direct reference to a specific journalist who made the discovery of the farce of the judicial reform and is now apparently being persecuted for it.
So exposing problems leads to becoming a target.
Exactly. The journal power, the fourth power, the press, which is so vital for holding power accountable for informing the public, is being actively undermined. It creates this environment of fear, of self-censorship, where the very act of reporting the truth becomes a dangerous act of defiance.
The conversation then really pivots to this deeply ingrained problem of impunity and violence. And it provides a statistic that's just chilling. It underscores the crisis. Less than 1 of every 10 homicides in Mexico actually results in a sentence.
Less than 1 in 10.
Yeah. It illustrates this extreme level of impunity, right? Where crime, even murder, usually goes unpunished. It fosters this climate of, well, lawlessness. And apparently the Secretary of Public Security even admits violence has increased in states like Sinaloa, Sonora, Tamaulipas, Michoacan, Guanajuato, which are already among the states with the highest crime rates.
That statistic is absolutely critical because it highlights the fundamental breakdown of the rule of law. The justice system is just ineffective at protecting its citizens, and it feeds directly into this narco-political reality the participants describe.
Right.
Where the belief is it doesn't really matter which political party is in power. The real control lies with the people that have the money that are the cars, meaning the cartels.
So the cartels hold the real power.
That's the assertion. They say cartels offer the money or promo plata, which means lead, like a bullet, a threat, or silver, a bribe. It implies this pervasive corruption that goes way beyond political parties and reaches deep into the very fabric of society.
So it's not just a political issue, it's systemic. It's almost like the operating system for the whole country, as one person put it. Mexico is seen as a computer system. Completely doesn't matter what operating system running or what government running because it's already taken by the narcos.
That's such a powerful, bleak analogy, isn't it? It paints this picture of a nation fundamentally compromised at its deepest levels, where the superficial changes in government just mask this persistent underlying control by criminal elements.
And the sophistication of these criminal operations is described as alarming.
Yeah, according to the discussion, the real criminals use technology that's even more sophisticated than the government's. They have extremely strongly encrypted communication channels, their own infrastructure.
Wow.
They apparently know how to clone army vehicles, even the uniforms, which supposedly have special barcodes so they can impersonate authority. They possess weapons described as more powerful than the army's, and they actively recruit highly skilled people, system engineers, civil engineers, sometimes obligating them to work for them, forcing them, which just highlights their pervasive influence, their ability to co-opt talent.
So what does this all mean then? You have these new laws, supposedly meant to fight organized crime, but they seem to leave vulnerable citizens exposed. Meanwhile, the criminals themselves operate with maybe even more sophisticated tech. It absolutely feels like a paradox, doesn't it?
That's a huge paradox.
But if the criminals are so technologically advanced with their own encrypted networks and all that, what does that imply about the effectiveness of any kind of broad state surveillance? Are these laws just chasing shadows while the real threats operate almost untouchably, digitally speaking? And what does that mean for the average person caught in the middle?
That's the core of the problem, isn't it? It seems these laws, while supposedly targeting crime, instead create this climate of fear and vulnerability for ordinary citizens, for activists, while the truly sophisticated criminal enterprises just continue, maybe even unimpeded, effectively outmaneuvering state surveillance.
Yeah.
And then there's another layer of complexity highlighted: international infrastructure involvement. A speaker brings up AT&T's expansion into Mexico, how they've taken over fiber interconnects, provide routers, forming this backbone system that's been designed for the daddy government Big Brother USA.
Wow. So suspicion towards U.S. infrastructure, too.
Deep concern, yeah. That this infrastructure allows tapping into anything, potentially including initial crypto key exchanges. It suggests this deeper, maybe global layer of surveillance and control that goes beyond just the Mexican government.
And the conversation circles back to that ominous name again, Pegasus.
Yeah, Pegasus. Former President Enrique Peña Nieto is explicitly mentioned as being in the news again for the Pegasus scandal, where he apparently admitted using it to spy on journalists and the opposition.
He admitted it.
According to the source, yes. And this leads to a direct challenge within the Twitter space. Someone makes a statement like, no journalists have been victim of any kind of harassment, and another participant immediately jumps in, demanding evidence, basically calling them out. It underscores the deep skepticism, the lived experience contradicting official narratives.
Right. The reality on the ground versus the claims.
And this raises that important question again. When official claims are so blatantly contradicted by documented cases, even by past admissions from high-ranking officials about using spyware against journalists, it creates this incredibly challenging environment for truth, for trust.
Yeah.
The dynamic becomes less about objective facts and more about, like, allegiance. Accusations of lies, falsehoods, and propaganda start flying. The reemergence of Pegasus in this discussion just underscores this persistent pattern of government surveillance, regardless of who's in power. It highlights that these issues are really deeply rooted, not just tied to one administration.
Okay, let's unpack this next section. The conversation then draws this really stark contrast, which is absolutely fascinating. On one side, you have these deep, palpable concerns about where Mexico is heading, and on the other, someone paints Uruguay as this, like, relative safe haven.
Yeah, a paradise even.
A paradise. But is it really? Or are there nuances we need to understand? A speaker describes Uruguay as a paradise because of its security, its impressive energy independence, its agropecuario agricultural strength, and its neutral international stance.
And it's ranked first, apparently, in Latin America and the Caribbean for things like freedom of the press, human rights, digital rights. It sounds almost utopian compared to the challenges being discussed in Mexico.
It really does. But is it the full picture?
Well, what's fascinating here is that even in this supposed paradise like Uruguay, you still see challenges related to government control, subtle censorship, forms of surveillance, maybe not to the same degree or with the same, dire consequences as in Mexico, but they exist. And this raises an important question. Does full freedom actually exist anywhere in our interconnected digital age? Or is it always just a matter of degree, a matter of the type of control? For example, despite having transparency laws, both active and passive, corruption clearly exists in Uruguay. They mention a state oil company having a $500 million deficit in just 2 years because of corruption.
$500 million. Okay, so that immediately punctures the perfect system illusion.
Absolutely. It shows even with transparency laws, there are still major issues with accountability and financial mismanagement.
And what about the press, if they're ranked first for press freedom?
Well, the press enjoys freedom from, say, direct persecution or assassination, which is obviously huge, but it's described as being very controlled by the government, especially when it comes to information from the Ministry of Interior.
Ah, so access is managed.
It suggests a more subtle but still pervasive form of censorship or information control, where access to critical information is managed, maybe curated by the state. Furthermore, they mention mass surveillance software, not Pegasus, but something else being used without judicial orders to monitor internet activity communications.
Really? Even in Uruguay?
Apparently so. Montevideo, the capital, has extensive facial recognition cameras private surveillance firms operate. So while journalists aren't getting assassinated, there's still a very real risk of censorship. It demonstrates that control exists, just maybe in different, less overtly violent forms.
It sounds like a subtle but still pervasive kind of digital monitoring.
Yeah.
Not unlike what people fear in Mexico, just maybe with different consequences if you get monitored. It's like a continuum of control, maybe.
That's a good way to think about it, yeah. A
Yeah.
spectrum. However, this whole comparison, it sparks a really strong point of conflict in the conversation. It reveals the raw emotional dynamics at play.
Oh, so
A participant from Mexico just dismisses the Uruguay comparison entirely. They argue that Mexico's situation is unique, it's deeply entrenched because of the whole narco-politics thing, and it's fundamentally not comparable.
they push back hard.
Fiercely, they question the relevance of outsiders, commenting on Mexico's internal problems, saying things like, what does that have to do with you? And, very pointedly, worry about your own country.
Wow. That's direct.
This dynamic is incredibly important to notice, isn't it? That emotional intensity from the Mexican speakers. It highlights the very personal impact of these issues. For them, it's not just some academic discussion or a comparative analysis, it's their lived reality. And they feel this deep sense of ownership and frustration when their situation gets compared to what they see as maybe less severe problems elsewhere. That personal stake just amplifies the discord. It makes the conversation a real microcosm of the struggles people are facing on the ground. It reveals this protective, almost defensive posture that comes from, I think, profound suffering and a sense that their unique challenges are often misunderstood or maybe even trivialized by outside views. It's less about objective comparison and more about the deeply felt experience of living under constant pressure.
Okay, let's really dig into Pegasus now, because it clearly remains this central, terrifying concern for people trying to navigate these surveillance states. Given how pervasive it seems in the discussions in our source material, How exactly does this sophisticated spyware even get onto devices? And what does it actually do once it's there?
Right. Pegasus infiltrates mobile phones, both Android and iOS devices. Primarily, it gets in via a malicious SMS message or maybe a WhatsApp message, often containing suspicious links that trick the user into clicking.
The classic phishing approach.
Exactly, but the most sophisticated version of Pegasus uses what's called a zero-click exploit,
Zero click, meaning
meaning absolutely no user interaction is needed at all for the phone to get infected. The target doesn't have to click a link, they don't have to open a message, download anything, nothing. It can infect a phone simply by the user receiving a message, which is then often deleted automatically by the spyware to erase any trace.
wow, that's incredibly stealthy.
It is. And once it's infected, it gains complete unfettered access to basically all data on that device.
All data. Like what?
Everything.
Yeah.
Capturing real-time phone conversations, reading messages, including standard SMS, and even end-to-end encrypted ones like WhatsApp and Signal.
It can read encrypted messages.
Yes, it operates at a level where it can capture data before encryption happens or after decryption occurs on the device itself. It can access precise GPS location data, remotely activate the phone's microphones to listen in on surrounding conversations.
So it turns the phone into a listening device.
Exactly. And it can take photos or videos using both the front and back cameras. It essentially transforms that person's mobile phone into a comprehensive personal surveillance device operating completely without their knowledge.
That's incredibly intrusive. It's like a complete digital takeover of your own device turned into a tool for state surveillance without you even knowing. How can anyone even tell if they've been targeted by something so sophisticated, so stealthy?
That's the terrifying part. Victims cannot recognize or identify easily if they're infected. The signs are extremely subtle, often totally indistinguishable from just normal phone glitches or behavior.
So like a battery draining faster or something.
Maybe, but it could be anything. The source mentions maybe erratic phone behavior, like constant messages popping up or settings reconfiguring themselves, but only if the user really knows their phone intimately, knows its normal baseline settings well enough to notice tiny deviations. For the average user, detection is extremely challenging, which is precisely why it's such an effective tool for covert surveillance. You usually need specialized tools, forensic analysis to confirm an infection.
And the source material provides extensive documented use of Pegasus, specifically in Mexico. This isn't just a theoretical threat, it's a chilling documented reality there.
Oh, absolutely. The recurrence, the scale of Pegasus use against journalists, activists, even across different administrations, it's deeply troubling. It demonstrates this consistent pattern of using these advanced surveillance tools, ostensibly for security, but demonstrably against people who are trying to hold power accountable. And it raises that critical question. If these tools bypass legal oversight, if they're used against those exposing truth, what real recourse do citizens actually have? The documentation is robust. During the Peña Nieto era, specifically around 2017, it was documented by Citizen Lab and the New York Times that the Mexican government acquired and used Pegasus to spy on journalists, human rights activists, opposition politicians.
Okay, so that was under Peña Nieto. What about since then?
Even after the change in administration during the AMLO era, from 2021 to 2023, investigations by Citizen Lab and the New York Times again confirmed new cases of Pegasus espionage, including against critical journalists and even members of SEDENA, the Mexican Department of Defense itself.
So it wasn't just a one-off under a previous government. It's this recurring, deeply entrenched pattern of surveillance, regardless of who's in charge. What was the scale of this, particularly in Mexico?
The scale is staggering. An April 2025 report, cited from El País, indicates that just between April and May of 2019, at least 456 Mexican numbers were infected by Pegasus. That represented a massive 37% of all global cases detected in that short period.
37%.
Yeah.
Globally, in just 2 months. Wow.
Yeah, it highlights the intense concentration of this kind of surveillance within Mexico. Furthermore, organizations like Article 19 and R3D documented that the Mexican military specifically used Pegasus. They did it through an intermediary company called Enstua to monitor journalists and activists, again, without judicial orders.
So direct military involvement in unlawful surveillance.
Yes. which further erodes trust in institutions and makes it really clear that the threat isn't just from one agency, it potentially comes from multiple branches of the state apparatus.
Okay, so given this deeply concerning reality, this pervasive surveillance, the chilling capabilities of tools like Pegasus, what can individuals actually do? What practical strategies for digital security are people discussing in these conversations to try and protect themselves in what sounds like, well, a surveillance state?
Yeah, the conversation does provide a pretty multi-layered, proactive approach to digital security for individuals. First, and maybe most crucially, there's this emphatic recommendation for encrypted messaging apps. Specifically, Signal or Session are mentioned.
Why those?
They're seen as offering more robust and direct security because they're designed from the ground up with end-to-end encryption and strong privacy features. The idea is that only the sender and intended receiver can actually read the messages.
Okay, so secure messaging apps first. What else?
Second, keeping your mobile devices and all your applications constantly updated is critical. Updates often contain patches for known security vulnerabilities, the very kind that spyware like Pegasus might try to exploit.
Right, patch those holes.
Third, just a fundamental rule.
Yeah?
Exercise extreme caution. Do not click on suspicious links or open spam messages. Be acutely wary of email phishing attempts too, as these are really common ways for malware or spyware to get an initial foothold.
Basic digital hygiene, essentially.
Exactly. And then, for an added layer of defense, they advise using a personal firewall to control network traffic going in and out of your device, and using a VPN if possible.
How does a VPN help?
A VPN encrypts your internet traffic and masks your IP address, making it harder for others to track your online activity or pinpoint your location. It creates a more private, more secure online footprint. And finally, for people seeking more detailed info or assistance, they highly recommend following organizations like R3D or Article 19 or Access Now. These groups provide critical, up-to-date information and support for digital rights.
Okay, let's unpack this. So the idea is basically to build a kind of digital fortress, layer by layer, relying on both the right tools and disciplined online behavior. But then there's the debate about operating systems like Linux, which often gets touted for its security. How much of that security is inherent, and how much depends on the user really knowing what they're doing? Is it actually impenetrable, especially against something sophisticated like a zero-click attack?
That's a great question. There is a strong argument made in the conversation for Linux being a much more secure operating system. Specific distributions like Parrot and Kali Linux are mentioned as examples for security-focused users.
What makes them more secure, according to the discussion?
Well, the core argument for Linux often revolves around its open source nature. Because the code is open for anyone to inspect, the theory is it's much harder for hidden backdoors or vulnerabilities to persist undetected. It's kind of security through transparency.
Makes sense.
And the concept of virtual screens or containers is also brought up as a powerful technique for isolation.
Containers. Like Docker.
Exactly like Docker, yeah. Think of it like creating these isolated miniature operating environments inside your main system. So if one of these environments were compromised, the malicious activity is contained within it. It can't easily spread to your core system or access other sensitive data. It's a powerful way to build these compartmentalized digital fortresses.
Okay, that sounds useful.
But it's crucial to add the nuances, right? While Linux generally offers a stronger foundation, web servers running on Linux can absolutely be hacked if they're not configured and maintained properly. And Android itself is based on a Linux kernel, which shows that just having a Linux base doesn't guarantee invulnerability if the software layers built on top are flawed or get exploited.
Good point. Android phones get hacked.
Exactly. And the expert clarifies that Pegasus, specifically, only attacks and concerns cell phones, not computers or external hard drives, unless you physically connect an infected phone to them via a cable. That distinction is important for understanding the specific threat model here. Your PC might be relatively safe from Pegasus, but your phone is the primary target.
So Linux offers a robust foundation. Tools like containers help compartmentalize, but it's not a magic bullet. Especially when you're up against something like a zero-click infection method on mobile phones. It still requires vigilance, understanding from the user.
Precisely. That zero-click method is really the pinnacle of sophistication right now. It makes general security practices much more challenging because it bypasses the need for any user interaction. And regardless of the technical solutions people discuss, the real-world application shows this palpable shift in user behavior driven by the threat.
Oh, so.
One speaker explicitly says they just don't use WhatsApp anymore for sensitive cases or vulnerable information. They prefer other, more secure platforms. They admit that many colleagues still use WhatsApp, but they make a point to warn them about the risks
So
involved.
actively changing their habits.
Yes. And interestingly, they mention using email, specifically Gmail, for sensitive communication to analysts. But with this implicit understanding that it might well be monitored, there's almost this like fatalistic acceptance. If there is any Pegasus, it is already seeing that I am informing the mechanism. It reflects this grim reality where maybe full privacy is unattainable for certain critical communications, and the goal shifts to managing exposure, ensuring the important information still gets out, even if it's potentially being observed.
This deep dive really lays bare the, raw, unfiltered nature of these online spaces, doesn't it?
Mm.
Especially when political tensions run so high and the stakes feel incredibly personal. There's this recurring, vivid theme. A specific participant, who they keep referring to as Ticra4T,
Yeah, Ticra4T.
who apparently enters these Twitter spaces with the seeming intention to just explode and aggressively defend the current Mexican government. One speaker characterizes this behavior not as debate, but as fanatic and pure propaganda, highlighting the perceived, ideological zealotry.
Yeah, what's fascinating there is how the digital space seems to amplify and maybe even distort these political tensions. It can turn what could be a discussion into more of a battleground. And it raises that important question. When discussions get so charged, so infused with this passionate, almost performative defense of a position, how do you even discern genuine debate from just attempts to silence or discredit others?
Right. It makes real dialogue almost impossible.
Totally. This kind of dynamic creates a deeply polarized environment, makes constructive dialogue incredibly difficult, often pushing people to these really extreme rhetorical positions. It's like a snapshot of online political tribalism playing out in real time.
But it can get nasty really fast, devolving into outright hostility. There's one particularly stark example where a participant, identified as Pimentel, just lashes out with these intensely aggressive, vulgar insults.
Yeah, the pelame un huevo y chupame el otro line. Pretty aggressive stuff.
Right, when he's accused of being associated with Tiger 4T.
Ah.
And the source notes that this extremely raw insult was recorded, which just highlights the very unfiltered, volatile nature of this Twitter Spaces environment. This level of personal attack, even in a digital space, it speaks volumes about the emotional weight, the deeply polarized nature of these conversations. It certainly makes for a very different kind of deep dive experience than, say, listening to a typical academic panel. It's messy, it's human, and it's fiercely personal.
It really underscores the profound personal stakes involved, doesn't it? And the complete breakdown of civil discourse when political ideologies clash so fiercely, often fueled, I suspect, by deep-seated frustrations and perceived injustices. And this intense behavior, it extends to how individuals manage their online presence, their identities, just to navigate these hostile environments.
I didn't mean.
While one speaker describes having multiple Twitter accounts because they get blocked so frequently for annoying behavior or making controversial posts, like even wishing death on a former president,
Wow.
they detail how Twitter's algorithm detects this kind of behavior and blocks users, which leads them to immediately create new accounts. It's this constant cat and mouse game just to see if I was blocked and maintain some kind of presence, some kind of voice.
So it's not just what they say, but how they have to adapt to the platform's rules or maybe lack thereof. They talk about explicit content on Twitter and its perceived laxness compared to, say, Facebook. It's this continuous struggle just to be heard, to exist digitally.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, this behavior, whether it's the aggressive engagement or creating multiple personas to bypass platform rules or even deliberately making havoc, it reflects this broader struggle for voice, for control in what feels like a constrained digital public square.
Yeah.
It raises an important question. Does this kind of online conflict, while it's often chaotic and certainly uncivil, does it serve as a necessary, albeit maybe unhealthy, outlet for frustration, especially in societies where traditional freedom of expression might be limited or even risky?
That's a provocative thought. Is it a necessary evil?
Well, one speaker even admits to deliberately making havoc in past spaces, bothering people and talking about politics, even using two accounts at the same time just to get more microphone access, more speaking time. This deliberate manipulation of the platform's rules just to amplify their voice, it suggests this desperate need to be heard, to disrupt the narratives they disagree with in a system they perceive as silencing dissent. It's almost a form of digital activism, however abrasive it might seem, born perhaps out of desperation.
Okay, so we've seen the pervasive problems laid bare. The digital surveillance, the deep-seated corruption, the breakdown of civil discourse, the huge emotional toll on citizens. Now, the conversation shifts into some incredibly controversial and frankly radical ideas for solutions.
Yeah, they start thinking outside the box, way outside.
And this isn't just about security anymore. It's about fundamentally reimagining how society deals with these deeply entrenched issues by questioning fundamental prohibitions. The core idea, as articulated by some participants, seems to be, if the state controls certain illicit activities, it cuts off the criminal element's main source of power and income.
Right, take the profit motive away from the cartels.
So what does this mean in practice? Well, the discussion explores these controversial solutions to organized crime, like legalizing drugs and legalizing prostitution.
It's definitely a radical departure from traditional law and order approaches, isn't it? It reflects this deep frustration with the current strategies, which clearly aren't working. The argument for drug legalization is framed around treating addicts as patients, not criminals, shifting the whole paradigm from punishment towards public health.
And the idea is this hurts the cartels how?
Proponents argue that legalization could cut off the problem for cartels at its source. By moving the economic power away from criminal networks and into regulated state entities, particularly by addressing where the consumption primarily happens, like the USA, for instance.
Okay. And the argument for legalizing prostitution?
Similarly, it's proposed as a way for the state to collect money through taxation while simultaneously cutting out pimps, reducing forced prostitution, and bringing a dangerous underground industry into the light where it can be regulated and potentially made safer. It frames it as a public health, economic, and human rights issue rather than purely a moral or criminal one.
It's a complete paradigm shift, yeah.
Yeah.
Moving from prohibition to regulation, state control. But then the conversation touches on that really contentious, often fraught issue of U.S. intervention in Mexico.
Yes. Always a sensitive topic.
There's this strong, almost visceral sentiment expressed that the U.S. constantly intervenes in Mexico, and that any U.S. intervention, regardless of its stated purpose, invariably makes things caca-shitty, to use the term from the source.
A deep-seated skepticism.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The argument put forth is that U.S. intervention primarily serves its own interess. They cite the massive U.S. prison industrial complex, which arguably benefits directly from drug arrests south of the border. Mexico is even unflatteringly likened to the Ukraine of Russia in relation to the U.S., emphasizing this perceived subservience, this unequal power dynamic.
It reflects this profound historical mistrust, doesn't it? A sense of being perpetually caught in a geopolitical struggle not entirely of their own making. And the point is driven home by the observation that weapons flow from the U.S. to Mexico, while drugs flow from Mexico to the U.S.
It's a two-way street.
Implying this tacit, maybe cynical agreement, or at least a system that inadvertently benefits both the narco-traffickers and certain U.S. interests, thereby perpetuating the problem instead of solving it.
Wow, okay. And simultaneously within this same conversation, there's a heated debate raging around the claim that Mexico is currently a dictatorship.
Right, that accusation gets thrown out there.
And the speaker making that claim is immediately challenged, with counterarguments saying, look, freedom of speech still exists, people can criticize the government openly, citizens still have the power to vote officials out.
So, a direct refutation.
Yeah, it's not just disagreement, it's an accusation of lies, falsehoods, and propaganda against those claiming it's a dictatorship, highlighting just how polarized the viewpoints are. And the point is also made that the violence, it's been rampant across multiple presidential terms, not just the current one. Calderon's era, for example, is described as a horror.
Which suggests the problem is far deeper than any single administration, right? It's rooted in these persistent systemic issues.
Exactly, which ties directly into the debate around judicial reform, specifically that controversial idea of electing judges.
Yeah, that's a really tricky one.
One side argues it's unequivocally positive for accountability. It forces judges to give accounts to the citizens, maybe like Mexico City's experience with elected governors, which they frame positively.
Okay, accountability argument.
But the counter-argument expresses profound concern that electing judges could lead to them being chosen based purely on marketing and campaign budget, rather than qualifications or impartiality. potentially allowing corrupt or even, and this is a strong term used in the source, satanic groups, to get their favorite judges elected, thus fundamentally undermining the integrity of the judiciary.
Wow, that raises a really important question, doesn't it? While accountability through elections sounds crucial, how do you ensure judicial independence? How do you guarantee the selection of truly qualified individuals when these critical roles become subject to the pressures, the money, the influence of political campaigns? It's such a delicate balance between democratic participation and maintaining the integrity of fundamental institutions like the judiciary.
Okay, let's try to unpack this as we draw our deep dive towards a close. We've really journeyed through an incredibly raw, insightful conversation, haven't we? Into Mexico's profound challenges. We've witnessed these deep personal frustrations, sharp ideological clashes, but also these powerful expressions of resilience.
Yeah, it's been intense.
It's unequivocally clear, I think, that this isn't just about policies or technology. It's about the very fabric of society. It's about this relentless struggle for basic safety, for freedom, for justice, and a truly profound realization comes from an external speaker in the conversation. The situation in Mexico, particularly the stories of disappearances, the horrifying discovery of mass graves. It chillingly reminds them of Argentina's military dictatorship, which just highlights the immense human cost, the sheer gravity of the crisis.
That comparison is truly chilling, yeah. It underscores the severity, the human tragedy involved. And it reinforces that sense that the problem isn't solely political. It's this deep-seated societal issue, this narco-politics that seems ingrained regardless of which party's in power. There's this palpable feeling among many participants that the situation is actually getting worse, that it's very complex with no clear, easy solution in sight. It leads to this pervasive sense of, well, despair sometimes.
Yeah, you can feel that despair. But despite that, despite the overwhelming nature of it all, there's also this powerful undercurrent of resilience, right? A refusal to just be silenced or give up. One speaker passionately reaffirms their internationalist and leftist stance, advocating for solidarity with our peoples of America.
Right, a call for unity.
They stress the crucial importance of not being neutral when faced with injustice, citing the dire situations in Palestine, other Latin American countries, as examples where an active supportive stance is imperative. It's this commitment to be the voice for those suffering injustices, including journalists, ordinary citizens, directly affected by these new oppressive laws.
And that personal commitment to activism, it really highlights the incredible, almost unbearable burden placed on individual citizens. They're forced to become their own frontline defenders in a way. They have to constantly adapt, use VPNs, live in this state of perpetual worry about surveillance. There's this alarming inability to trust even basic legal processes, like reporting extortion, because of the deep-seated corruption within law enforcement, where the officials you report it to might actually give the tip to the criminals, turning victims into further targets. It forces citizens into the state of constant vigilance, constant self-protection, effectively living in a society where the very systems meant to protect them are fundamentally compromised.
It's a truly harrowing reality, isn't it? Where the systems designed to protect you might actually turn against you.
Yeah.
Yet somehow, despite these overwhelming challenges, these moments of despair, there is this underlying current of resilience, this refusal to surrender. There's still this persistent hope for greater transparency, for accountability, even if it means confronting deeply entrenched corruption and facing profound personal risks. It's a struggle that forces individuals to become their own cybersecurity experts, their own activists, their own guardians of truth in a way.
It really is a testament to the enduring human spirit, I think, in the face of just profound adversity. A refusal to let the light of freedom and truth be completely extinguished, even when the darkness feels overwhelming.
So we've explored these multi-layered challenges facing Mexico, from the sophisticated digital surveillance, the pervasive influence of narcopolitics, to the deeply personal struggles of citizens and journalists just trying to live their lives, speak their truth. We've seen how technology that's meant for security can become a tool for control, and how the very fabric of trust in institutions can just erode, prompting individuals to seek out their own forms of digital and personal protection.
And that raw Twitter Spaces conversation itself, it was a microcosm of these very struggles, a testament maybe to the power of open dialogue, even when it descends into heated disagreements, personal attacks, and it's a vivid illustration of how deeply these issues resonate with people on the ground. The passionate arguments, the personal stories, the raw emotions, they underscore that these aren't just abstract concepts. These are lived realities, shaping the identities, the daily lives of the participants.
So the final thought maybe for you, listening, In a world where information is power and surveillance capabilities just keep growing more sophisticated, how do societies truly protect the fundamental rights of their citizens without stifling the very voices that seek to expose injustice and push for change?
Yeah, that's the core dilemma.
What does it mean for individuals when their only recourse against pervasive control is to become their own cybersecurity experts, their own activists constantly on guard? And how do we, as informed citizens observing this, continue to engage with these complex realities? Balancing empathy for those directly affected with a critical analysis of the forces at play, always seeking to understand that nuanced critical difference between security and control.